So hello everyone, thanks for showing up. It's the last talk before lunch. My presentation will be about accessibility as a business proposition. But before I start, I'd like to see some hands. So who of you in the audience is building websites themselves? It's about everyone, including me. And who of you cares about accessibility and tries to involve that in the process? It's almost everyone. And who of you actually uses tools to test the accessibility, like the Wave toolbar, before putting a website live? None. That's what I was hoping for. So, yeah, hello everyone. This is a group photo of Drupal Community. At the time we just started our small company. We started end of 2011 with 3 people. But ever since we try to be ahead of the rest of the people. So to prove that, this is me in the photo, and next to me are some colleagues of mine. Of course, this is just a gimmick, but we always try to be in front of other companies, and I'm going to tell you about what we try to do that and how to do that. So this is a part of our team. Photo is a few years old. Team is a bit bigger now, but although we are a web agency, we still value. Hey, Floris. We still find business cards of great value. They're easy to exchange, they last a while, and they give you something to talk about when you hand them out. Take the back of this card. We have a subtle braille. I'm not sure if you can see it on the photo. I have a stack of cards here with me. Feel free to take one if you leave later on. But the braille reads LimoenGroen. So a blind person who gets the card can read LimoenGroen, go to Google, search for LimoenGroen, and access our accessible website and find more information about us and our contact information. So LimoenGroen is, we are a Drupal expert, obviously. We are based in Amsterdam. We focus on delivering websites that last. What we see is that a lot of websites don't last long, and we think that a website should last at least 5 years. And we find it very important that a website can be used by everyone, regardless disability or device that he's using. And our tagline, Duurzame Websites, which is sustainable websites in English, is what I will talk about in my presentation and why we chose that tagline. My name is Baris Wanschers. I'm the chair of the Dutch Drupal Foundation. I'm a Drupal evangelist. I'm an accessibility enthusiast, and I'm a front-end developer by origin. But I build modules. I do everything with Drupal. I'm also co-owner and founder of LimoenGroen, and we are with 10 people now. I use Drupal, I guess, since 2006. I maintain about 15 concept modules, and now and then I like to work on Drupal core as well, mainly on accessibility issues. So some stuff I work on, an example is the underlines in Bartik, which is introduced to Drupal 8. Drupal 8 ships with underlines for all the links within content. So people who is colorblind can distinct links from the text if he is unable to see blue, for example. Also in Drupal 8.1 we introduced a language button in CK editor, which makes it possible to mark a piece of text and say, well, this piece of text is Dutch or English or French, so a speech reader can pronounce it in the correct way. Wim Leers helped me with writing this patch. It was a 3.5 megabyte patch because it contained the compressed JavaScript for the CK editor, which is like huge. So when we founded the company in 2011, I looked at Drupal.be, Drupal.nl previously, which lists about 100 companies, and I was looking through all these names and colors and taglines that were used to see how could we distinct ourselves and how could we come up with a name and a tagline that really stand out from the crowd. Then if you look at all these companies, and they build great stuff, but if you look at just the taglines that some of them are using, full service internet bureau, internet solutions, online media, functional websites, is all, I find it a bit boring. It doesn't really say something about the company. There's like 5 Drupal specialists, so what does Drupal specialist A does better than Drupal specialist B? So I think that's where we stand out in having a tagline saying we make sustainable websites. Luckily there's a few companies globally who take this approach. For example, do you know which company this is? It's for kitchens. That's what they do. They bake big websites. And we have this one, Commerce Guys, right? So you could focus on performance and optimization, 2 bits. and a new company founded by chicks who focus solely on Drupal 8 migration. And I think this is very good to have a small niche and excel in it and be very good at it. And people know to find you if they have a Drupal 8 migration problem. Well, you have to talk to chicks. Here's a company who does that. You can also focus on a target audience like Mustard Seed Media does. Oh, sorry. They just focuses on churches and ministries. They pick a select audience and, well, we're going to build websites for you. So a church who needs a website, they will go to Mustard Seed probably if they're in America or Canada. So, and we use the color and the name that we have. We like to do some funny things with it. For example, April's Fool 2012, so 2012, April's Fool 1 April, we had a practical joke in which I looked at the Drupal.be companies and I found out that there's a lot of Drupal logos which are red. So I wrote a press release saying, well, we don't want to be like, we want to be more like the others and we don't want to stand out anymore. So, you know what, dear world, we're going to change our name and our logo to something red. So instead of LimoenGroen, we changed our complete website, Twitter account, domain name, everything that we use to reddish red.nl. Just for fun, but we got clients who called us like, why did you do that? Because our, I forgot to change the logo, it should be reddish red. Okay. Anyway, we changed the Twitter and the mailboxes and everything was reddish red. And one of the clients called me and said, well, our finance department just got used to the name LimoenGroen and it took me weeks. Why did you change it? So, well, sorry for that, but it's just a day, tomorrow it's over. Well, oh, okay. So yeah, it's fun. And we use the same color to stand out in photos like this. I think you can spot us. This is Prague 2013, this is Amsterdam 2014, we're on the right. So, enough about Drupal. What we see is most websites last 2 years, 3 years, tops. The website is launched, hasn't been touched for years, maybe a little bit of content editing by the client. And then after 3 years, the client expands and they say, well, now we're going to move from the Netherlands to Belgium, so we want to offer our content in French as well. And then the development agency, they have to say, well, you should have said that before, now we have to redo the whole website and we can't do that anymore. So I'm not talking about implementing a new design, I'm talking about completely rebuilding a website after 3 years, throwing everything away, doing content migration, and it happens a lot. And that's really something that we find is a shame, and a website should last at least 5 years. And we have a lot of websites that we've built in 2011, 2012 when we started and already implemented a complete redesign, but we could leave the base intact, all the content types, all the content, it stayed in there and we could easily improve stuff and change stuff. So we think that websites are never finished for real. Like if you build a website, the go live is just a moment, but a month later we should have another go live, or maybe a day later. And you should always be able to change stuff and improve stuff and measure stuff what your clients find of your website and implement these changes. And for what we try to do is like, for everything that we implement, we always think, if we do it this way, how will that work if the client wants something else 2 years later? Can we still use the same way? Or should we maybe do it another way, which takes a little bit more time now, but makes it easier to change in the future? And that's something that we try to do for every little bit that we implement. And a good example, I think, it's very obvious, but if you build a website in Dutch, it's quite easy and quick to write, code in Dutch and strings in Dutch. But we never do that. We always, and I think you do that as well. You put the English word in the T function and you translate it, and it's a little bit more effort. But if the client wants to go to French in 2 years' time, we can do that. That's easy. So what we try to do, we build scalable websites that's easy to maintain, easy to extend, and that can be used by everyone. So we find accessibility is not something that you have to pay extra for to make the website accessible, or that is done at the end of the project and we've spent 2 days making it accessible. We just try to implement that in our development processes for everything that we do. So accessibility should be a default, like a precondition. So to make a little bit more sense, this is, for example, a picture that I just used in a blog post on the website, and it shows old people in the Netherlands that have a form of a handicap. The image is in Dutch, sorry about that. but it says maybe less than 80,000 blind people, there's 240,000 visually impaired people in some sort of way, colorblind people 700,000. There's a lot of people, which sums up to 25% of all Dutch population has some sort of disability. If I put that image on my blog post and explain a little bit in the text around the image, neither a screen reader nor Google can understand the image, because it's just an image. I can put some information in the alternative tag, but I'm not going to put everything in there. So an easy fix here is to just add the same amount of information into a data table, just a simple table, and hide the table with a class. In Drupal 7 we have element visible, in Drupal 8 we have visually hidden. It's the same, it works the same. So you just put one class, I have a pointer here. So this class here makes that someone who can see an image doesn't see the table, but a screen reader can understand this table, and Google does as well. So, and we try to do this for everything that we build. So if we have a nice JavaScript graph with some bars and animations and whatnot, first thing, well, what is this graph actually communicating? Shouldn't we output this data first in a table and then use JavaScript to hide the table and show the graph, which is maybe half an hour more work, but then Google can understand this data actually. So thinking this way while developing, if you use semantic HTML the way it is used to be, then you have already done half of the work. So for example, use a proper heading structure. Maybe I'm talking open doors, I'm not sure, but if you have a page with a title, make it H1, and if you have some sub-alineas paragraphs below it, make them H2. Don't use an H2 because it's a bit bigger than an H3, use an H2 because it follows an H1. A list is a list, so if you have a listing of photos, a gallery for example, use an unordered list element. If you have search results, it's a listing with an order, basically. The most important one is on top, so use an ordered list for the search results. Never use the unformatted list option in views if you build a view, because that outputs just divs, and divs don't contain any semantic information. HTML comes with a lot of elements that explain to a browser and to a screen reader what it's used for. So, for example, the navigation element or the header element, or you have a button and you have whatnot. What we see a lot is this kind of stuff. You have a rule attribute, which is an Y-area attribute. You can explain to a browser, well, although it is a link, it should be used as a button. And this is like a quirk or workaround if you are unable to use a proper button element. But in Drupal we can. You can change everything. So if you have a button on your website, use the button element, and if you have a link, use the A element. It's basically really simple. And use the Wave toolbar. Just after the session, install it. It's a free plugin for Chrome and maybe also for other browsers. It's very easy to test a website. It looks a bit like this. This is the Hogeschool Gent, hoogent.be website. And if you click on the Wave button, it will show you a listing on the left side with all the errors that you have, some alerts, and the list goes way and way further, but also some good tips like, oh, you've done this very well, and here's some tips, and it's very good. And for every thing here, you can click on the information. It gives you an explanation why the legend for a field set is important, for example. So what we see here is that there's an alt text which is missing, which is really important to have. I'm not saying you should have an alternative text on an image, but there should be a tag. You could leave it empty, but an image without an alt tag, what happens if a screen reader hits that image, it will, because it doesn't have anything else, it will pronounce the complete URL of that image, hoping to give the information in another way to the, hoping that the image name contains some information. So leave it empty if it doesn't communicate any information. If it does communicate information, use the proper alt tag. So there is empty buttons, probably for the mobile navigation. See that a lot. There's a button element without any text, and if you click on it, the JavaScript triggers the sliding in, sliding out of the mobile menu. So something to improve on this website. Also, the heading order is really off. This image, you can see the first heading that's outputted is an H5. and some H5, then we have some H3s, then we have some H2s. Well, it should be the other way around, right? And you're not allowed to skip headers as well, so it's very strange to go from an H3 to an H5. From H2 we go back to an H4, and this whole page doesn't have one H1 tag. There's no H1, which is also very strange. So I think this is a really valuable plugin for your browser, and it helps you to test the accessibility. But how do we sell it to clients? Because it is a bit more work to build accessibility in your processes. And I always try to sell it, well, it's a way to reach a wider audience. We've just seen 25% of the people who have a form of disability. If you sell stuff on your website, there is a bigger market to sell stuff to if they can use your website in a good way. It's also a way to score much better on Google. I wrote an extensive blog post about Google is blind. It's called Google is blind. Google is not really much more than a screen reader. So if you make your website accessible for screen readers, Google can scrape the content much better, and it reads the alt text, and it understands the heading structure, and it reads the table-related information, although it's hidden. It's just the right thing to do to build a proper website. Drupal already helps a lot. Drupal core conforms to the WAG 2.0 standards, but also the ATAC standards, the authoring tool accessibility guidelines, so even the admin interface and the WYSIWYG toolbar is really accessible in Drupal. For example, you could try to leave the mouse or your keypad and just try editing content with just your keyboard, and that works in Drupal 8. So even the settings page for the toolbar, you can move the buttons only with your keyboard, which is really useful. If we try to compare accessibility with responsive design to clients, then they understand the added value. Because a few years ago, we could say to a client, for example, when there is a booking process or I don't know, a route planner or so, we could say, well, this part of the website, no one's gonna actually book a plane ticket on their mobile, right? So why should we make this website responsive? It's not really, we don't have to do that, right? And the client says, yeah, sure. A few years ago, that was probably normal to say, but now you cannot even think of not making your whole website responsive, right? I cannot imagine a situation where you would create a desktop-only website in 2016. We as builders, as developers, should not decide whether to hide certain parts of the website. What I hear often said by designers, we are not doing any design ourselves, we partner with organizations, but they sometimes say, well, the screen is really small. You know what? Just leave the sidebar out on a mobile. So what? So this information is either useful and anyone should be able to use it, or it's not useful. Why show it to desktop users then, right? So it should be equal. The experience on the website should be equal whether you use a huge desktop or a small mobile. And small mobile is nothing more than a disability. It's something that makes it harder to use a website, and we as builders should make the website so that people on a mobile screen can use the website. So with just a little bit more effort during the building process, you gain a lot, and that lowers the total cost of ownership. So same goes for responsiveness. If you do that from the beginning of the project, it's quite easy. It's a few hours, maybe a day more in the whole project to make the website responsive, let alone the design, but just implementing it. However, if you decide on the last day of the project, hey, let's make it responsive, well, that's going to be expensive and very hard. And the same goes for accessibility. If you're going to do that at the end of the project, it's expensive. Just take it in the process, and it's much easier to implement. So basically, it's not rocket science what we do, and I hope that a lot of companies will do this as well. Build websites that last. Think in the future. How will this website of this function behave in 5 years' time? Can everyone use it? Use tools like the Wave toolbar, and there's a lot of other tools as well where you can test, like contrast ratio. Is this link visually, is the contrast enough for this link or this text on this background that people who have color blindness can still read the text on this background? And by doing so, your clients and end users will love you for it. That's my talk. Thanks for the attention. Feel free to get the card and feel the briar. Any questions?
Well, there was an example about an infographic where you put a table with all the content of that infographic in that table. I like the idea, but are there, well, since I'm a Drupal developer, are there maybe some construct modules who support that? Like, or is this really a custom thing you have to do for an infographic, for example?
Yeah, in this case for this infographic, since I'm a developer too, it's easy for me to switch to source code and add this class element invisible. But I used the table plugin with the button just to write the output. But in the other example that I gave for real graphs created by JavaScript, we can make it in code so that it's easy to output the data that we scrape from a web service in the table on the screen, and then we add JavaScript to throw the table away and bring back the JavaScript. So, yeah.
What is your opinion upon contrast increasing modules, text bigger and smaller modules? Should we still use those?
No.
Great. And how do we sell to our client that the screen reader of the disabled person can do it better than we could do it with modules? Do you have any tips on that part?
We are the experts. They have to trust our opinion, I guess. And we have to explain clients why a small button on your screen to increase the font size is hideous, and people have just browsers to do that better. I have a contrast button in my browser at the moment, and if I click the button, everything is black and white. If an end user needs software or tools to make their experience better, they already have it. We should not offer those tools I'm currently building a website for a government, and where the designer made a high contrast button, which, for example, if you have a slideshow with some text over images, if you put the high contrast button, it will add a block with a solid color behind the text, so it's easier to read. But I said, why either make the design so that everyone can read it properly, right? Why do you even make the background half transparent? Make it solid for everyone. It looks fine as well. Or either remove the button and use tools that are already in place. People have screen readers. Why would you have a read this page button on your website? It makes no sense, I guess.
It's totally new domain for myself, but I feel with the age I'm starting to increase fonts, etc. So I was very interested to see how you approach those problems. I have a rather question. Did you try one of the market leaders? How do they implement these accessibilities, like Amazon, eBay, or something? I mean, this wave toolbar and know your knowledge. Do you think that any of them are behaving the way they should, or?
So the question is, do market leaders build accessible websites themselves? Yeah.
25% of the population is a lot. I mean, I cannot believe that Amazon didn't think of.
That's a really good question. You trigger me to fetch data and write a blog post about it, and I might do that. I'm not sure. In the Netherlands there is a law that says that governmental websites should be accessible for everyone. But on the other hand, in the Netherlands there's no fine if you don't do that. So a lot of governments still suck in making accessible websites. For example, in Finland there is a law that gives you a fine, and the fine is a percentage of the amount the percentage of your profit. And it's not only for governmental websites, it's for all companies that aim to civilians. And it's not even only for websites, but it's also for example, a bank should not only have an accessible website, but their cash machine should be accessible as well, and their device where you make payments with should be accessible as well. And they get like monthly checks if it is accessible. If not, you get a fine, and a month later they're going to recheck and you get a fine as well. So I would be happy if they do that in the Netherlands and in Belgium as well.
I will wait to see your blog.
I will do. Thanks. Any more questions?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. It's not, if you have 4 million people in the Netherlands who have some kind of disability, and especially when you talk about accessibility, it's typically about screen readers, etc. But I would be very interested to know how many of these 78,000 blind people actually access websites using a screen reader, and how many of them actually buy on a website. Because if I'm running an e-commerce site, I'm happy to open it up for everyone. But if these people never input their credit card because, obvious reasons, or they don't convert into buyers, should I invest in accessibility
Yeah.
with more formal business.
I think I have no numbers on that as well, but I think don't underestimate blind people. We had a developer at our office. We invited him. He's blind, so he walks the street with a dog. But he is a developer. He writes code. He is very good at submitting patches and explaining problems to other developers. And he explains he has a braille reader, so it's like a keypad which puts up little buttons in the form of braille really fast. So his finger goes alongside 20 of these buttons which change continuously. So it's like you hear them ticking, and he uses his finger to read lines like this. It's really fast, and I cannot even feel like one braille. It's very hard for me to, but they just read it like this. It's really fast. And the screen reader software that he uses as well, they pronounce the text, and that software uses, for example, these heading structures. He has some shortcuts that he can tap through all these heading levels, and he can tap through all the navigation elements on the website. And he's really handy with that. And he puts his speech reader to 250% or so. It's so fast that I cannot even hear what the thing is saying, but they involve their skills with the software like we do with our hands and our eyes and whatnot. So I wouldn't underestimate blind people, and I really believe if they can use a website, they will do it. Yeah. Good.
And think about the scale of the whole Europe, huh?
Yeah.
It's going to be...
Yeah, so there is a law coming up now. I forgot the name, but it's a European-wide law that will define a WAG as a standard for all countries in the EU. So in the Netherlands, we threw away our guidelines. It's called Webrichtlijnen, web guidelines, this was basically WAG plus some extra rules regarding maintainability of websites. So we had all the rules from the WAG, but also it says, well, you're not allowed to add inline styles, for example, in your HTML, because if you're going to change your CMS in a few years' time, it's harder to maintain if it contains inline styles. So all those rules were part of the Webrichtlijnen, but now this European thing is coming up. They threw away the Webrichtlijnen, and we're going to adhere to these European standards in a few months, so, which is good, I guess. Yeah.
I think a year ago, also the Belgian government was pushed towards having all their websites accessible, and then it was a company, AnyServer, who was giving out labels. But the interesting part is that you can actually go super far in accessibility. It kind of never stops almost. Can always improve and always improve.
Yeah.
So they kind of have gradations. So AA, I just had to Google it because I forgot what the gradations were.
Yeah, it's 1A, AA, AAA.
Yeah, but what do you recommend striving towards? What is like an overkill and what is okay for 98%? Because, like, let's say you have a video on the homepage, you don't really want to put captions on there because it's like a background video. You don't want to put captions. You don't want to get a whole transcript of what everyone says in the video just below the video itself because it's accessible. You're going to have to be some limit somewhere.
Yeah, I feel your pain. And in the Netherlands, we had to adhere to AA as a governmental organization instead of AAA. So it makes it a bit easier. But I hear you making some assumptions in that sense that you say, well, subtitles, for example, it's very hard to implement. And not many users really need that. We can put that somewhere else on the page. But I don't agree with that. I saw a stat on Facebook that about 80% of the people on Facebook watch all these movies in their timeline without sound. Because I'm in a train and I don't want to disturb other people around me, or because I'm sitting on the couch next to my partner and I don't want to put some noise on. So I love it when people on Facebook put some subtitles in their video, even though I can hear and use the video in a proper way. So I think you have to use proper sense when building these websites. And I'm not saying that the websites that we build are 100% accessible, but we try to do all the quick wins during the process. And if we do a governmental website, sure, we are more strict to ourselves than we are for a commercial client. I have no golden rule on what to use. Yeah.
I know from Drupal Community there are a lot of developers that are always complaining about coding standards and so forth. But is there some general discussion where they talk about the accessibility on the community? Is there really active activity on it?
Yeah, well, there is a page on Drupal.org/accessibility, which has the accessibility statement. And in the issue queue in Drupal.org, we use the hashtag accessibility as well. And we even have an accessibility lead within the community who was able to work on these patches, and his opinion votes counts. So if you are interested, use the hashtag accessibility in the issue queue to see what's happening in all these issues. And Drupal 8 really is a lot more accessible than Drupal 7 is. And we're continuously improving that with every minor release. So I'm really happy with Drupal 8 there. Yeah. Last question? Then we go to lunch.
Since this is a talk about accessibility as a business proposition, I was wondering if your company solely attracts clients that want you to adhere to these guidelines, or if you as a company make promises to any client that these are the guidelines that we will adhere to when we build websites. I mean, do you make commitments or do they ask?
No. Most of the clients don't really give a thing. But we of course explain to them what we're doing when we do a proposal, when we do a sales pitch. However, by telling the world that we do this, people who want an accessible website know that they should talk to us instead of the other companies in the Netherlands. And we hear that a lot from other development agencies, like, oh, we have a governmental website, and we'll talk to LimoenGroen, they can do that. So even if not like strictly doing it for every website, it still helps that you communicate that you do it. It's sales. So, yeah. Good. Well, thanks again. Yay.